This experience, the saints' experience, is about developing you in mind, heart, and body. And we spend a lot of time talking about school and curriculum. We spend a lot of time on the court and out on the fields. But not often enough do we sit down and talk about the things that have potential to derail all the great work you're doing and we're intent upon doing. Life presents you opportunities. Drugs and alcohol are one of them, and the potential to derail everything you're working for is huge. And so today we've got a special guest speaker. I want to thank Mr. O'Byrne for helping put this together, but today we've brought Mr. Rocky Herron in to talk with you about making great choices and avoiding the things that can derail your great potential. With that, Rocky.
Hang on, Joe. Okay, good. Can you guys hear me? We're good? So, hey, good morning. You guys are bringing an excellent energy to the presentation. I appreciate that. We're going to be here for a while. I got a lot of information to share with you. This is for you. When I'm done, I would be fascinated to hear what questions you have, comments, criticisms about the information I'm going to share with you. I'm not here to tell you to do anything, guys. I'm not here to tell you to do anything. Your choice to listen, your choice to tune me out, your choice to think about what I'm going to share with you, your choice to not think about it. But what I'm sharing with you is relevant to everybody in our society. I am a product of Francis Parker School for 11 years, right? I did not realize how privileged I was at Francis Parker until I met the real world after college, started working as a DEA agent. You guys, many of you, have no clue how privileged you are to go here. You have absolutely no clue what the real world is like, what most schools are like. Some of you do, but most of you don't. So I'm here to share with you my experiences as a DEA agent, as a father, as a patriotic American who's profoundly concerned about where our country is today and where it's headed. So I was a DEA agent for 31 years. If you don't know what the DEA is, it's the Drug Enforcement Administration, similar to the FBI. But while the FBI does all different types of investigations, the DEA does one: drugs. Now, I was just teaching in Acapulco last week. I was teaching in Guatemala a couple months ago. And sometimes those students, and maybe some of you, look at me and see an old bald white man, and you think, what does that guy have to teach me about my world? What can that guy possibly teach me about my reality? And the truth is, I don't know any of you. I don't know the circumstances of your lives. I don't know the kids I teach anywhere. But what I do know is the pain and suffering that comes from drug abuse. I've taught in Africa and South America, Asia, a bunch here. The drugs that people use in those different places are very different. But what's not different is the suffering and the pain that comes from that drug abuse. So I'm going to share with you some heavy information. So you have it. That's it. And honestly, I come here with a very simple purpose: change all of you. That's all I'm trying to do today, is change all of you in one simple way. I was teaching at RB High School yesterday. I did 4 assemblies. I first became aware of RB High School 15 years ago as a DEA agent, arresting current and former students at RB High School who had gotten addicted to OxyContin and then had turned to dealing OxyContin. And when those young adults were in my DEA office in handcuffs, crying, about to go to jail, I'd talk to them. I'd ask them, when did you start using, why? And we would have good conversations. And almost all of them would say, in tears, if only somebody would have warned me. If only somebody would have told me how bad it was going to be, I wouldn't have started. And I heard that so many times, guys, I went, okay, that's going to be me. So that's what I'm here to do today. Share information with you so you have it. Not one of you can leave this assembly today and ever tell yourself or anybody in the future that you didn't know what could happen to you or your friends if you go down this road of putting the chemicals in your bodies. I always talk about Kiki Camarena in my presentations. Kiki was a DEA agent just like me, working in Mexico back in 1985, the year I was graduating Parker. He was doing a good job. The drug traffickers got angry with him. They kidnapped him, tortured him terribly for several days, brought a doctor in to wake him up when he passed out so they could torture him more. And finally, they murdered Kiki, left his 3 children as orphans. Shocked me, it shocked the country, it started the whole Red Ribbon movement, but he's been forgotten by our society in many ways, but not by me. Anybody know who that handsome young man is? clickers on drugs. Yeah. Okay. I'm sad you can't recognize that guy because that was me when I started out in the DEA. That is me as a baby DEA agent. I don't... And I don't put that up here to be sad about what getting old does to you, right? I put that up here to show you that since that age until now, I have seen what drug abuse causes around the world, all right? I do know what I'm talking about. Next. This is the first group I worked with in San Diego. I worked hard here in San Diego as a young DEA guy. Back then, when you came out of the DEA Academy, they would make you go undercover right away. 2 months on the job, they told me, hey, Rocky, you're gonna go undercover with some guys from Tijuana and negotiate to buy 10 kilos of cocaine. The only time I saw cocaine was in a 10th grade party at Francis Parker. And now they're telling me I gotta buy 10 kilos of it from some guys from TJ. So I had to come up with a story. And I said, well, why don't I pretend to be a college student? Because I was a 23-year-old recent college graduate, and they all laughed at me. They said, that's ridiculous. Nobody will believe you. And I said, well, I'm gonna go with it. And it turned out to be the best undercover story ever. All I had to do was tell those guys, I lied to them, and say, hey, I run a fraternity at San Diego State. If you sell me coke, we can make a lot of money selling it together at San Diego State University. And guess what they did? They sold me the dope. Because San Diego State back then, and San Diego State today, is famous for being a huge drug market. I talk to the students who go there, and they are all encouraged to put these chemicals in their bodies. Next. After 8 years, after 8 years of working the streets of San Diego, I was sent to Bolivia in South America for the DEA. They took me to Washington to teach me Spanish, and in a bunch of meetings, everybody said, Rocky, you're going down to Bolivia as an American advisor to help them with their problem. Everybody called it their problem, the cocaine problem. But when I got there and I began working with this group of cops, the second day, they gave me a rifle, and they said, let's go. And we went out in the jungle looking for the laboratories. They don't make cocaine in the city where it's easy to find them. They make it in laboratories hidden out in the jungles and forests of Bolivia. Very difficult, very hard work, sometimes very dangerous work. And I learned a lot of things, but when I set that laboratory on fire, and I got my friends together so we could smile and take a picture to try and keep motivating ourselves to do this every day, I realized something powerful. This isn't their problem. The cocaine that was going to come from that laboratory was going to be sold to Americans here. The money that was used to build that laboratory in Bolivia was paid for by American drug users here. This is absolutely not their problem. The environmental destruction, the poverty, the corruption, the violence that Bolivia suffers under is our problem. We're paying for it all. And I came home with a whole different attitude. I've done bigger cases. I've done stuff that belongs in movies. I'm happy I survived all that. I am absolutely much tougher than I look, thank goodness. Right, next. I'm very happy with my career choice. If any of you are interested in law enforcement careers, I'll be happy to talk to you about that. We need good people. And during the end of my career, I was offered promotions. I was a good agent. But I said no thank you to all the offers of promotion because I found out I like arresting drug traffickers. I like putting the handcuffs on them. When we would take them to our office at DEA to interview them and process them, I would volunteer to be the guy that drove them to jail afterwards because I liked being the one that pushed them in the cage. I liked many of the drug dealers I arrested. They're intelligent people, they're charismatic, great senses of humor, and I was very happy putting them in prison because they're simply people selling poison to destroy you and your families and our communities. In the picture, you see drug seizures of crystal meth. They're about 100 pounds each that I was taking from the drug traffickers. 10 years before this picture, I would take 10 pounds of meth in an investigation, and the DEA would congratulate me, 10 pounds. As I retired, I'm seizing 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 500 pounds, and the drug traffickers are laughing at us. At the moment, they don't care. We take 1,000 pounds of drugs from them, they produce 2,000 more to sell it here. Law enforcement is not doing so well right now. And this is a sad assessment of where we are today. The world you're living in now the one you're growing up in, the one you're going to raise your children in, the drugs are stronger, cheaper, easier to get, and more socially acceptable than ever before. I can't change how available they are or how strong they are. What I can try to change is how socially acceptable they are to you guys. I can give you information that hopefully makes you realize it's insane and stupid to put it in your body or let your friends put it in their bodies. Awesome headlines in our country right now. 13-year-old brought fentanyl to his middle school, used it, and died at school. Ugly incident. Gets worse. They did an investigation, found he had 100 baggies of fentanyl in his bedroom and 40 baggies of fentanyl in a backpack at school with him. In Bakersfield, California, a month ago, 2 13-year-olds were fighting in a middle school. A pill bottle fell on the ground. Teacher opened it and inhaled fentanyl. You are living in a world today where a classmate, neighbor, teammate, cousin can bring a deadly substance to school or a party and come up to you and say, hey man, try this. It's just like weed, but better. It's just like marijuana, but better. Trust me. And kill you with it. Next. 16-year-old guy in California gave fentanyl to a 12-year-old girl. I don't think his intentions were good with that little girl, but he killed her with it. He's now been charged with murder. You are living in a world where people your age are being charged with murder for distributing drugs. That's new. I'm not actually comfortable with that, but at the same time, I don't know what you're supposed to do when teenagers are giving substances to other teenagers and killing them with it. In Tacoma, Washington, a mom took her baby to the park for a play date or something. Before she could stop him, the child picks up something blue off the ground and eats it and goes into a fentanyl overdose because somebody had dropped a fentanyl pill at the park. It's a miracle the police officer showed up and recognized it as an overdose and saved that child. People want me to come talk about fentanyl. Everyone's freaking out about fentanyl, and they should be. But it's not just fentanyl. In our San Diego County emergency rooms, almost 40 young people a day are showing up in marijuana-induced psychosis. This is not marijuana-induced anxiety, guys. This is marijuana-induced severe mental illness. They show up screaming, vomiting, have to be sedated, and yet you're being told, hey man, it's just this herbal thing, it's this natural plant, it's just weed, Rocky. It's just weed, Rocky. 40 young people a day in psychosis from smoking that just weed. And then people tell me, well, nobody ever died from marijuana. Well, that baby did. Numerous cases now of young adults in psychosis committing suicide, jumping off of buildings, running in traffic, and this mom left out the marijuana gummies and her baby ate them and died from it. I don't talk a lot about statistics in my presentations. I think we're too manipulated by stats. But people dying from drugs is a hard number to mess with. It is what it is. When I joined the DEA in 1990, 10,000 Americans a year were dying from drugs. All of those deaths are preventable death. It is not cancer, it's not COVID. When someone dies from drugs, it is a consequence of at the first, it's a choice, right? It's a consequence of that choice in the past to start putting drugs in their lives. But today, it's not 10,000 a year who are dying, it's almost 10,000 a month. 10,000 Americans a month, just as beautiful and special and intelligent as you guys, are dying every month as a consequence of a decision to put drugs in their bodies. That's 300 today, 300 tomorrow, 300 the day after. And if we don't start reacting as a society, if I get invited to come back next year, it's going to be 350 a day. That's about probably 15 or 20 are going to die during the time of my presentation with you this morning. Think about that one. While I'm talking to you about this problem, 15 Americans are going to die from a decision to put drugs in their body. Every single person who starts using drugs convinces themselves it won't be them, right? Nobody thinks it's going to be them when they start. But if I show you numbers, they're just numbers. So I'm going to show you the faces of people who died. Some are famous, most are not. You'll see their name, the age they died, and the drug or drugs that killed them. Can we get sound on this? So welcome to our country in 2022. That was about 50 people. 300 are going to die today. 300 tomorrow. You would now all know it's not just adults who suffer from this. I meet teenagers who somehow think it's going to be weak or stupid people only that suffer these consequences. Those do not look like stupid or weak people to me. Beautiful people who made some dumb choices. We're going to try and get the sound back, so I'm going to talk about that video for a minute. Do you remember the basketball player Len? That beast of a dude? Any of you guys heard the name Len Bias? All right, I'm glad some of you know Len. We all should know who Len is. When I was in college, Len was graduating University of Maryland. He was called the next Michael Jordan. He was famous. As a country, we were so excited to see where Len would sign to play pro basketball. The Celtics offered him a multi-million-dollar contract, which back then was a lot of money. And his friends were so excited for Len that they threw a party for him, gave him cocaine, his heart stopped, and he died 2 days later. He never played pro. The Celtics gave a jersey to his mom in a frame. If any of you guys somehow think that you are stronger, smarter, more able to resist the consequences of drug abuse than Len Bias was, I would like you to share with me how you know this. Those two 13-year-olds, Grant and Ryan, were so clever. They thought they were so clever. They discovered a website that offered to sell them drugs through the mail. I'm quite sure that website promised those drugs were safe and pure and clean. The package came to their house, they opened it and died from using it the first time. Everybody 13 years and older in that video chose to put drugs in their body. Everyone 12 and under was either given the drugs by a parent, or they found it when the parents were passed out, or the younger babies, their moms were nursing while they were using the drugs and killed their children. Do you guys all understand that a pregnant or nursing mother should never use drugs or alcohol? I'll ask again. Do you all understand that a pregnant or nursing woman should not use drugs and alcohol? Yes. Thank you. Because apparently many people in our country do not understand this. And it's not fair to the children. It's not fair to the children. I want you to think of yourselves as protectors of our society. I know this school is raising you to be strong, ethical men and leaders in your families and in our country. And this problem is carving us up. When I started in DEA, it was 10,000. When I started teaching, it was 35,000 dying. I was shocked that it had gone to 35,000. And I was naive, and I said, man, our country won't stand for this. We're going to fight back. I was convinced, and I was wrong. Because every year since, the death has been going up 5,000 or 6,000 deaths a year. I used to teach in the schools. Man, does it have to get to 100,000 before we actually start doing something serious? And then last year we went over 100,000, got a couple days of headlines, and then nothing. You know, I'll just keep going without the sound. Okay, now I'm going to share this lovely problem with you. Hundreds of thousands of babies are born damaged by drugs and alcohol in our country because a lot of people don't understand what I just shared with you. We have babies being born to fetal alcohol syndrome. We have crack babies, meth babies. Thousands of babies being born now damaged by marijuana. Their moms were smoking early in pregnancy because they've been brainwashed to think it's not even a drug. But I talk about the opioid-addicted babies. Opioids are drugs like heroin, fentanyl, OxyContin. And we guesstimate about 35,000 babies are born every year in our country full-on addicted to those opioid drugs their moms were consuming. Do you guys think those pregnant moms know they're drugging their babies when they use the opioids? You would be wrong. They do know. The problem with opioids You take them at first, yeah, okay, maybe they make you feel good. Very quickly, however, if you try to stop using them, as good as they made you feel on them, that's how much they hurt you or more if you try to stop. It's called withdrawal sickness. If you meet someone who's gone through opioid withdrawal sickness, you'll understand. They'll lay on the floor and poop and pee on themselves. They can't move. They're in so much pain. So these 35,000 moms make a bargain with the devil, I call it. They decide to keep using the opioids to avoid the pain. But what they're doing is simply giving it to the baby, because on the day the baby's born, they cut the umbilical cord, the baby goes into withdrawal. It's not baby-sized withdrawal. It's the same full-blown agony that an adult would feel. It makes me ashamed to point out to you, gentlemen, that this beautiful, precious baby in our country is not getting vitamins from the nurses. It's getting the painkiller morphine to help it try to cope with the pain given by its mother. Trust me, the baby's cries are as ugly as this baby's trembling. Unfortunately, you can't hear it, but you can get the idea from the images. 35,000 babies a year born like this. The doctors and nurses that work with these children are saints. We ask for volunteers to come in and hold these babies to try to calm them as they go through the withdrawal pain. And just so you understand how much pain those 35,000 babies are in, I work with wounded warriors here in San Diego, another blessing in my life. When my friends were fighting in Afghanistan, they stepped on landmines that cut them in half like you see them. That's how they landed on the battlefield. Their fellow soldiers came over and gave them morphine, gentlemen. So let that settle in for a moment. In our country, the one you're going to be raising your families in, more than 35,000 babies a year have to get the same medicine we give men this badly wounded on the battlefield. I discovered this problem 12 years ago. It enraged me. It wounded me. And foolishly, I said, again, oh no, our country won't stand for this. We have to protect those children. 12 years later, you can read about this. You can look it up. It's there. We're not talking about it. And I personally believe if we're not talking about a problem, we're not trying to fix it. We are having tech problems today. My philosophy is not to wait for you to live in addiction to try to help you. My philosophy is not to wait until you're arrested for drug crimes to buy your own drugs to try to help you. I go into schools to share this reality with as many students as I can. I've done about 800 of these assemblies now in 15 countries to about 170,000 young people. I'll never know if any of you are listening. You're all stuck here. The school decided you needed to be here. You're all hearing my words. But I don't know if any of you are actually listening and applying this information to your lives and the choices you're going to have to make. If one of you today, however, if one of you takes enough information from this presentation to make a decision to stop using drugs, or to never use drugs, or to fight to get a loved one to stop using drugs, that's a win for me. Because I know how much pain one person causes to the world living in drug addiction. My program is called I Choose My Future. Not just say no. I'm not telling you to do anything. I use this little hand sign, I choose my future. It looks like the loser sign, but that's not what it means. You are the architects of your destinies. I'll repeat that. You alone are the architects of your destinies. You are being given an insane opportunity to develop an education here. It's up to you what you do with that education. I'm not going to be with you at the party, guys. I'm not going to be with you at the friend's house when he comes up or she comes up and says, hey, look what I got, let's do this. You're going to have to be thinking about the consequence. But, this isn't going to work either. You can't hear Mr. Mackey, but you guys know Mr. Mackey? Yeah, just say no, drugs are bad, you're bad if you do drugs. I play this clip for two reasons. One, to get a laugh, because yes, I know I look exactly like Mr. Mackey. That kind of sucks for me. But two, it's a joke on South Park because it's a joke. And yet there are still people today coming out in the community trying to give guys and young adults like you that message. It doesn't work. So I'm hoping by showing you the reality of the world around you, oh my gosh. We have tech gremlins today. All right. So Torrey Pines High School, 2,000 students. The teacher that took that picture, I'm just not going to use this thing. The teacher that took that picture said he's never seen those kids off their phones and listening. I wish I could say that's because I'm so beautiful and such a great speaker. Don't think so. I think it's because they view me as a credible presenter on this topic. I'm hoping some of you view me as a credible presenter on this topic. I'm not coming here to sell you anything. I'm not coming here to lie. I'm coming here to share the reality I've lived, the pain that I've lived, so you don't have to experience it in your lives. And your loved ones don't have to experience it. Next. And I get to teach around the world. When I go in the juvenile halls here in San Diego, I talk to the young men in prison, your age, in prison. And I ask them, what age did you start using drugs? And they always tell me 8, 9, 10. We live in a world where many adults apparently think it's appropriate to give drugs to children as young as 8, 9, 10. I met a student at RB High School, a young female came up to me sobbing. Her mom was a druggie, sent her to live with her grandmother, who gave her marijuana at 9 to calm the kid down. And now she takes antipsychosis medication at 14 years old because she damaged her brain development. This is not a joke, but it's hard for me to get into schools to talk to kids that young. Next. And then I travel around the world. And everywhere I go, you can cycle through these. Everywhere I go, I discover the young people understand everything I'm talking about. Because they're watching the same garbage on the internet and the movies and the TV shows and the TikTok and Snapchat that you are. They're listening to the same fools telling them drug use is cool and normal and everybody does it. These idiots who say, look at me, I use every drug in the world and I'm on top of the world. And they're lying to you because they're not telling you about all the friends they lost along the way. You have to be smarter than this. Next. The Marines, I didn't think the Marines would listen to me. And I discovered I was wrong. Half of those guys told me they joined the Marine Corps to escape some misery where they grew up. One kid lost 6 friends dead from overdose in high school in Ohio. Next. Next. These are kids in Mexico. It blows, you can't hear the sound. I don't expect my audiences in the States to cheer for me like these guys do in Mexico. But when I go deep into Mexico and I tell the teenagers that I understand the problem, that I care about the problem, I lie to them. I lie to these kids in Mexico and tell them that in the United States we're trying to reduce the drug problem. Because I want them to believe there's a hopeful future for them in their country. Because they're scared. They're scared of where Mexico is right now and all the violence and the corruption paid for by American drug users. Next. Half of what I'm sharing with you guys are my experiences as a cop, the other half raising 3 daughters. No, that's not my real hair, by the way. That's a dress-up day at my kids' elementary school. Next. My daughters today are 27, 25, and 22. I tried very hard to keep my daughters away from drugs and alcohol when they were in high school. Do you think I was successful? No, I was not. The youngest one in blue there was 11. And she came to me and said, Dad, my older sisters won't stop picking on me. And it's true, I couldn't stop the bullying in my own house. She said, can I spend my weekends at Danielle's house, her best friend? I said, yeah, of course. I knew that family, beautiful home. The mom's a law professor, the dad's a real estate developer. Great. And I'd pick her up on Sundays and she was tired, kind of worn out. What I didn't know, that family had a 17-year-old son that liked to smoke marijuana. The parents thought, that's cool, no problem. And you know what? Let's buy him marijuana so he can smoke it at home instead of getting out in trouble out in public with it. So what do you think that told the 11-year-old little sister when the 17-year-old was told he could smoke weed in the house? Good for me too, right? So I didn't know that every weekend for over a year, that little friend was stealing weed from her older brother and sharing it with my daughter. When my daughter was 16 or 17, we got in a big fight about something else. Lots of yelling. I accused her of lying to me. I accused her of using drugs. And my daughter goes, Dad, I don't use drugs anymore. I said, excuse me? And she explained that from 11 to 12 every weekend. And I said, okay, you stopped at 12. Why? And she said, Dad, I recognized how it was changing me. I didn't like who I was becoming. God bless her, my daughter saw the change just from weed. Her best friend didn't stop. That mom's a recruiter at a very famous university you've all heard of. That young woman was guaranteed admission to that very famous university. But instead of going there, she dropped out of high school at 16, pregnant, and now she's 22 with 2 kids. Marijuana doesn't kill many people, guys, but it kills the dreams of thousands of young people every year. I'm a patriotic guy. You have to come past 3 American flags just to get in my house. I've lived all over the world. I'm very grateful I get to live here, that I get to raise my kids here. As many problems as we have. But I'm not blind to those problems. Next. And this is the one I'm fighting against. For reasons I can't explain, nobody can explain, we're the biggest drug-using country on the planet. We import more drugs, we use more drugs, more people living in addiction, more people dying from overdose, more babies being born drug addicted than any other country on the planet. There are other rich, free countries in the world that don't drug themselves like ours does. I don't know what the answer is, I don't know what the cause is, but I'm trying to fight back in the way I can. And I need you guys to be thinking about that. I need you to love this country for the blessings it offers you and fight to fix it in the ways you don't like, because the problems that are surrounding us aren't going to fix themselves. You guys need to grow up and step up and fight to improve this country for yourselves and your families. Next. The money that people spend pays for the violence. Americans who don't care about hurting themselves with drugs obviously don't care who they hurt with the money they spend. This is $27 million. It was on a boat going from Florida to Colombia. A friend of mine in DEA seized that money. That money was going to pay for a lot of violence in Colombia. Every piece of money, every bill came from the pocket of some drug user somewhere in America. But we don't talk about that. Next. The violence in Mexico. How many of you have family in Mexico? Raise your hands. Does everybody in this room know how violent Mexico is right now? I hope you do. I hope you do. Oh, back. This is a random group of bad guys in Mexico. Not even an important group of bad guys. All of their salaries paid for by American drug users, those weapons of war smuggled illegally from our country to cause violence in theirs. I feel sorry for the good cops in Mexico having to fight against this. That is a satellite image of San Diego and Tijuana. From space, it looks like we're one city, one urban zone. It's hard to see the two cities apart. We share the ocean, the beaches, the mountains. Very beautiful part of the world, right? But we know there's a difference. There's that border. We are lucky enough to live in San Diego, which is one of the safest big cities in America. They happen to live in the most violent city on the planet. Tijuana is not one of the most violent cities on the planet. It is, again, officially the most violent city on the planet. How can that be? We're sister cities next to each other. And the only explanation I can come up with is all that money Americans spending on the drugs funnels down into TJ and pays for the carnage. To the drug dealers, you're not human beings, guys. I don't care if it's a drug dealer in the neighborhood or at the city level or the national level or internationally. You are only dollar signs to them. They're not trying to kill you with the drugs. They don't want to kill you. But if they do kill you, they don't lose any sleep. I know this because when I would drive the drug dealers to jail, I would ask them the question, how do you sleep at night, you dirty so-and-so, knowing you're selling poisons to kill people? And they always tell me the same two things, gentlemen. Hey man, if I didn't sell it to them, somebody else would. And those people made a choice. They lose no sleep if you die. They blame you. What they want is for you to be in addiction. They want you to like the drugs, get hooked on it. And once you're hooked on it, you'll give them whatever they ask for. Everything they ask for to get your drugs to avoid you going into withdrawal sickness. In the picture, we see a baby less than a year old whose parents taped the drug heroin to his body to try to smuggle it from TJ into San Diego. They got caught. Baby went to Child Protective Services. The parents went to jail. But if this family cared so little about the welfare of their baby smuggling the drugs into our country, how much do you think they care about you if you hurt yourself using those drugs? And the answer is 0. But the drug dealer you meet is going to come up to you with a smile. Hey, look what I got. You can trust me. This is good and safe. They will cold-bloodedly look you in the eye and smile to get your money. They don't care. Next. Next. This has great sound, but I'm going to ask you guys to read the subtitles. This is a woman in Colombia who sells a drug called 2CB. It's a new synthetic, nasty, poisonous drug that she sells for a lot of money. And they got to interview her. Yeah, I wish it had the sound. Next. So what she says is, we don't use the drug we make because we know it damages the central nervous system. We don't care what happens to the people who use it. We just want them hooked on it. And we know it sells better if we make it pink. Simply making her poison pink makes people just as bright as you guys go, oh, this looks nice, this looks safe, I can believe the person offering it to me. The people selling that drug for her will go up and say, look, this is great, I use this all the time. Lying because they don't ever use it. And that's one of the great ironies of working as a DEA agent. The people making these drugs and making all the money on it, they don't let their employees use it. Because if you use drugs, you become dangerous and unreliable. The drug cartels don't want to work with unreliable people. They want to sell it to you to make all the money. That's all they care about. Next. Your brains matter, guys. From about 11 years old until about 23, 24 years old, your brains are growing dramatically. And when the brain stops growing at 23 or 24, that's the brain you've got for the rest of your life. And what science is discovering, if you start using drugs and alcohol at this age to change how your brain is working, because that's what getting drunk or high is, you're putting chemicals in your body to change how your brains are working. Science is discovering if you're doing that at this age, you're also changing how your brains are growing. In these images, you see scans of humans, human brains, and the blood flow in human brains. On top, images of somebody not under the influence of substances. But you go around that diagram, you see a 17-year-old smoking weed, somebody cigarettes, opioids, coke, alcohol, and meth. Going back to that 17-year-old smoking the weed, you see dark spots in that brain scan. Those are not dead brain. Those are parts of his brain deprived of blood. Putting the THC in his body changes the blood flow in his brain. Can he see that? No. If we ask a 17-year-old, hey, are you hurting yourself smoking marijuana? What's he going to say to us? He's going to go, no. Because I've asked the question hundreds of times, and the 13 or 15 or 17-year-olds who answer it, they laugh. They think the question's ridiculous. They've convinced themselves with all that great life wisdom they have that they're not harming themselves. But science is showing something different. Because at 17, gentlemen, if he keeps doing it, those dark spots in his brain that aren't working are not getting blood to grow. It's called incremental damage. It happens invisibly, but it adds up. And eventually, when you do notice it, it's too late to do anything about it. Next. If you want to look at who you're going to become in the future, look at the choices you're making now. Are you choosing friends that are going to help motivate you and lift you up in life, or are you running with friends who like to make obviously stupid choices? Your future depends on your effort and you're being smart and you're making good choices. That's it. No one's going to give you success. You're not going to stumble into it by accident. You earn it, guys. And drugs and alcohol are the fastest way for people just like you around the world to destroy their own chances in life. You put these chemicals in your body, it's the dreams you destroy aren't going to be mine. They're going to be yours and your family's. Next. These are my laws of substance abuse. Number one, it starts as a choice. You guys already know this. You don't go to the party and someone says, hey man, use this drug, I'm going to hurt you. Right? Use this or I'm going to beat you up. If somebody comes and says, hey, look man, look what I got, let's do this. Hey, party on, right? And you make a choice. It's binary. It's yes, no. It's not complicated. If it's yes, game on. If it's no, you can lie. You can tell the person whatever you need to tell them. You say, you know what, I don't feel up for today. I don't want to do anything today. You say, I'll think about it. Maybe I'll do it next week. When I was at Francis Parker, my friends offered me weed at 11 or 12 years old. I knew marijuana wasn't going to kill me. I was curious about it. I wanted to fit in with my friends. A couple times I almost smoked weed just to get it over with. And then I remembered something. It's not going to help me. At 12 years old, I had already figured out, why am I going to do something if it's not going to help me? So I said, no, thank you to my friends. And they went, oh, come on, Rocky, come on. And I said, no, thank you. Finally, they stopped bothering me. I just made a decision. I didn't abandon my friends. They didn't abandon me. I didn't tell any adults. All I need you guys to do, when it happens, because if it hasn't, it's gonna happen in your life that someone's gonna walk up with a drug and try to get you to use it. And all you need to say is, you know what? No, not today, thanks. Number two, go back. Number two, all drug users eventually change negatively. Nobody becomes a better human being. I use these simple examples. It might be funny to be at a party with some teenager high on weed for a few hours. It's not funny at all to live with a teenager who's addicted to marijuana. It might be funny to be at a party with someone who is drunk at the party. It is not funny at all to live with someone who is a drunk. When I said that last line in Guatemala, in the high schools, at least half of the Guatemalan high school students, their bodies went down like this. We're told, those of us watching, that those kids are suffering from alcoholism in their families. And number three, the drug user never ever just affects themselves, ever. In San Diego, we lost 12 high school students last year to fentanyl overdose. 3 high schools had me come in the day after a student died to talk and give these assemblies. When a student dies in a high school, it doesn't just affect the student, does it? Destroys their friends, traumatizes the entire student body, traumatizes the teachers who blame themselves, ruins that family forever because those parents blame themselves. The young woman who starts partying with drugs in high school, thinks it's great, keeps partying with it after high school, gets pregnant, and doesn't stop using it, damages her baby. Those are just some of the examples. Next. I don't think drug users are bad people, in case you're wondering. I think drug dealers are terrible people. I got no problem with them spending a lot of time in jail because they're selling poison, and they know they're selling poison, and they don't care. But drug users are beautiful people like you, just as smart as you, just as loved by their families as you, who are making some dumb choices that I know from my life experience that eventually are going to harm them and harm their relationships and harm their dreams. Next. Who else gets hurt? In this picture, you see a 4-year-old kid in the car with his dad and the dad's girlfriend. The adults are heroin users. They injected heroin with needles in the car in front of the kid and were driving around. Just a normal day for them. Next. But during that drive, the woman started to pass out from an overdose. She injected too much heroin. Her boyfriend panicked, tried to get to the hospital to save her life when he passed out from an overdose while driving. Vehicle went out of control, almost crashed. That little kid in the back seat thinks dad's dead, thinks the girlfriend's dead. You see the police officer's arm coming to the window. Next. But when we look at his face, do we see any reaction in his face? No. He's used to it. I've consulted with psychiatrists and psychologists, 100% agreement. That lack of reaction simply indicates that's his normal. He's seen it before. This may be the first time it happened in public like this. How many times at home alone did those adults pass out and that child had to try to find food by himself, tried to go to sleep at night by himself alone? We all agree also that's very severe emotional damage in that little boy in our country, and I worry for him when he's going to be 15 or who he's going to be at 25 when he has kids on his own. Next. This young mom was living with her mother back in Philadelphia. The mother passed away, so now it's just this young woman and her baby. She was depressed. She told her friend that she was depressed. The friend said, hey, I've got something that'll help you. Try this heroin. And so she started taking heroin. And yeah, it helped her for a minute. And then she got addicted, and then it wasn't so fun. And one night she overdosed and died in bed. She didn't suffer. She just went to sleep forever. 3 weeks later, the police opened the apartment to figure out what was going on, and they found the baby had died as well. And the baby had died from dehydration, which is a horrible, slow way for anybody to go. And if that's not bad enough, it gets worse for me. They did a follow-up investigation, and they talked to the neighbors because they were confused how this could have happened. And several of the neighbors, not one, several of the neighbors said, oh yeah, a few weeks ago, we heard a couple days and nights of screaming and crying, but then it stopped. So in your country, that beautiful little boy began to die alone. The only tool he had was screaming for help, and the people that heard him couldn't be bothered to call 911, get the apartment manager to do anything to rescue him. Next. The world's different with you guys. Your generation's been changed by the phones. You guys are going to this incredibly supportive school environment. I go to many schools where it's not supportive at all. And many, many young people really don't even know how to communicate with each other anymore because they're doing all the communication through the phones. Next. I'm guilty of this. I was Super Agent Rocky for the DEA. I was trying to save the world. I was gone too much. I worked too much. I missed a lot of trying to be with my daughters. And even when I was home, I often was not present mentally. My mind was in my business. My mind was in my investigations. I know many young people today are experiencing this. The communication between teenagers is broken down. The communication at home is breaking down. Next. And then you add in social media. And what social media has taught young people is you don't share reality. You don't share anything without a beauty filter. Many, many young people have been taught you don't share any part of the problems in your life because the world will mock you or think less of you. Next. And it's changed the reality for young people in our country. Hopefully not for too many of you guys in this supportive environment. But there are a lot more teenagers today, a lot more depressed, a lot more anxious, a lot more lonely than ever before. And they're carrying all that pain around in them and they don't know how to get rid of it. Next. And this is where the tragedy happens. Those teenagers who are carrying around all that anxiety and loneliness and depression and low self-esteem, they go to the party and a friend offers them the drug. Coke, meth, fentanyl, ecstasy, the super potent THC. And the tragedy is the drugs work. The drugs work. They get in your brain and change how it's working. And for a few hours, those young people don't feel lonely. They don't feel bullied. They don't feel anxious. They feel funny, strong, powerful, part of a group while they're high or drunk. But when the chemicals wear off, all the pain comes back. Because while you're drunk or high, you're not doing anything to solve those problems. They're always waiting for you. And of course, you're adding more problems in your world. And the kids who discover that, some percentage go back to use it again and again to escape from reality. That's called self-medication. And today, if you do self-medication for any length of time, you become medically addicted, which is a lifelong condition. And now you've got a real lifelong problem. Next. This, for me, is becoming the most powerful slide in my presentation. What's waiting for you if you go down the road of drug abuse? Heavy drug users do not go get a job at McDonald's to make their money. They sell their bodies, they sell drugs, they commit crimes to get their money. Some of you probably know young people growing up in poverty because one or both parents are substance abusers and they're spending all that money on drugs and alcohol instead of spending it raising their kids. Some of you probably know young people living in terrible broken home situations, neglected by their parents, having to raise themselves. That sucks for those kids. It's not fair. And some of you know kids, because I've met too many, who are victims of abuse from their own parents. Mom gets angry when she gets drunk, dad gets angry when he can't get high, and they take it out on their own kids. At RB High School yesterday, a whole bunch of those kids came up to me crying to share that reality with me. I'm going to therapy. I'm going to therapy because I don't know how to cope with that. All these beautiful kids coming up to me. 12-year-old girl came up to me in Lemon Grove a few months ago, 12 years old, about this tall, sobbing, hugs me, and she goes, Rocky, I'm clean from meth and coke for 7 months. At 12 years old. Another 11-year-old girl in Lemon Grove comes up to me crying, thanking me. And I go, why? And she goes, you taught me my dad's abuse is not my fault, it's the alcohol's fault. So I have a message for you guys. I hope none of you are living these conditions, but if any of you are, it's not your fault. It's simply not your fault. And I say it that way because too many young kids who are growing up in these conditions do blame themselves. They think it's their fault that parents drink or use drugs. And those kids don't reach out for help, and they don't realize they can have a different future. Next. Opioids are amazing medications to help you when you're in pain. In today's world, gentlemen, if you get a prescription from your doctor and your pharmacy in your name, those pills are safe to take. Any other pill that anybody offers you anywhere today is going to be a fake made in Mexico from fentanyl. My friend Joey is a chemist in the DEA laboratory here in San Diego. I asked him recently, Joey, of all the pills that come into the pharmacy that look like they came from come into the laboratory that look like they came from a pharmacy, what percentage are actually from a pharmacy? And his answer was 0. Everything that looks like a Xanax, a Vicodin, an Adderall that's being sold on the streets is a fake. Next. The opioid drug that society was worried about when I was your age was heroin. We all knew what heroin was. Everyone knew it's a dead-end drug. You don't start using it because you can't stop. We did not have heroin use in our schools. I think if we had heroin in our schools in San Diego, we would have freaked out as a society. But we don't have that problem. Next. We have this problem, fentanyl. That little bit of fentanyl on the penny on the left is enough to overdose and kill me, gentlemen. It's the same high as heroin, the same addiction as heroin. It's just 50 times stronger. And when it's that powerful, the people making it, if they make a small mistake in dosage, they kill the person using it. Sometimes we see carfentanil. You guys can't even see that small white dot of carfentanil, which is enough to kill me. Carfentanil is an elephant tranquilizer. If the San Diego Zoo wants to do surgery on an elephant, they give it a little dosage of carfentanil and the 2,000-pound elephant goes to sleep. In Argentina, recently 24 people died from buying cocaine that had carfentanil in it. There is no drug you can buy today that isn't likely to contain fentanyl and likely to kill you eventually. Maybe it won't be the first time, maybe it's the 5th time, maybe it's the 10th time. Next. And we have the cartels in Mexico producing these fake pills. For 6 years now, they've been faking these pills in massive numbers. There's no medicine in those things. They're not a real pill that has fentanyl added onto it. They're made from fentanyl to look like they came from a pharmacy to trick people. These are pills we see coming up from TJ, designed to fool American drug users. Next. These are drugs I seized in my investigations, and this is what it turned out actually to be. Next. All of it. The drug dealers today, guys, they will get a legitimate prescription for, say, Xanax. They'll go to some doctor, they'll get a big pill bottle of Xanax. They'll sell those pills. They'll then go to their drug dealer and say, hey, I want more pills that look like Xanax. And they'll refill the bottle with the fakes. And they'll come to you at the party and say, look, see, these are legit. I have a prescription. You can trust me. And young people just as bright as you guys, okay, I can trust this guy. And they take those things. Next. And it comes in a powder. Huge numbers of people are dying in the country from taking what they think is meth or cocaine, and it turns out it was powdered fentanyl. We don't know if they're making a mistake, if the drug dealers are making a mistake, if the drug dealers are accidentally mixing the two together. We don't know. But the reality is it's killing people everywhere. Next. And this is why the pills are so dangerous. It's not scientists making these things. They're taking these dangerous chemicals, they're mixing them with sugar to make pills. Some of the pills, when they come out of the machine, as you see on the bottom, have none of the drug. Some have a range of the drug. Some have enough to kill anybody who takes it. They're being made by the millions. There's no way to test them. They're not tested. They're just sold. And they're sold, and they're sold, and they're sold. And the only time we find out they're deadly is when you guys go to a party and you take one, or your best friend or your girlfriend takes one and doesn't come home. I have met teenagers, numerous teenagers, who come up to me and say, yeah, we know about that, Rocky. So when we go to a party, we watch other people use drugs first. You live in a world like that, where that's happening. Their strategy is to go to a party and see if you guys die from using the drugs. And if you don't, they decide it's safe to use. And I have to explain that's a bad strategy. It doesn't work. Because you could go to the party and see 4 people using those first 4 pills and be fine. You grab that 5th pill, or somebody you love grabs the 5th pill, and you're gone forever. Next. This guy, look how much he loved his baby. He was abusing fentanyl. He knew it was fentanyl. His family warned him. He said, I know what I'm doing. See, they all believed that, right? He convinced himself he knew what he was doing. And he did, until the day he didn't. He bought a blue pill, he chopped it in powder, snorted it, died on the floor of his house. His baby, his young son, came in, saw dad laying on the floor not moving. Baby went over to wake dad up. Dad didn't wake up. The baby was trying him, touching his face. Baby got fentanyl on his fingertips, touched his own lips, and died of an overdose next to his dad. I promise you, Patrick convinced himself he would never hurt himself with his drug usage, and I guarantee you it never occurred to him that he would harm his child from his drug use. Nobody knows how it's going to affect them before they start. Next. This guy took 10 pills to a party in California, killed 10 friends. Next. The first investigation, I worked here in San Diego, 1,000 pills at a time were being hidden in these blankets. We thought those were a lot of pills. Next. 2020, we started seeing them 100,000 at a time hidden in cars coming in from TJ. Next. And now, guys, they're coming in by the millions. Multiple recent seizures of more than 1 million of these pills. And I know if we take 1 million pills from the drug traffickers, they got 10 million through successfully. Next. Well, I like to play this little game. Next. Which is the real Beyonce, 1 or 2? This one's easy, right? Next. Next. Which is the fake Nike, 1 or 2? Now you guys are good, 1. Next. Next. But now you're at the party this weekend, and some cool kid like me walks in with a handful of pills and says, look what I got. Which one will kill you? Hey, shh, 1 or 2? Which one's the fake? Next. Next. Which one's the fake one? 1 or 2? Next. 1 or 2? Next. 1 or 2?
2.
Oh, everybody loses. Everybody just lost the game. Shh, settle down. Everybody lost because I rigged the game against you, right? No fair, Rocky. You had a lot of fun playing the game until you lost it. And I know it's a stupid little teaching game that I created, but the message is actually pretty powerful. Because outside in the real world, it's been rigged against you. The drug use game today in the real world has been rigged against you by the drug traffickers. If you play it, if you let your friends play it, eventually you and they will lose the game. Next. Now we have this. If you saw that laying on the floor in a school, your first thought would not be, that looks dangerous. You might not know what it is. It looks like chalk or taffy or an eraser or something. Next. But it's fentanyl. The only reason that somebody would buy that white fentanyl from Mexico and remanufacture it with food coloring is to market it to you guys. This guy knows if he makes it look pretty and colorful, people just as bright as you will go, oh, okay, cool, I can take this. It looks nice. Just like the lady in Colombia adds pink to her drug. Next. And now the pills coming from Mexico. These came from the same machines in Mexico. They have the same markings. They're supposed to be blue to trick people. These are coming across the border by millions now. What this tells me is the drug cartels no longer have to trick people here. They believe they've now trained Americans to want fentanyl, so they're simply bringing fentanyl over the border to sell it to them. Next. And now the interviews are backing me up. Americans have discovered how powerful fentanyl is, how inexpensive it is, and they want it. It's insane, but it's our reality, and it's getting worse. Everything I'm sharing with you today, every single part of the problem that I'm sharing with you this morning is getting worse. If you don't already have somebody in your world that's suffering like this, odds are soon you will. It's going to be personal for all of us very quickly. Next. And fentanyl's not even enough. I heard about this 3 years ago in Philadelphia, and I couldn't believe it. As if fentanyl's not dangerous enough. In Philadelphia, they started adding a horse tranquilizer called xylazine to the fentanyl. And I thought that was just some insane thing they would only do in Philadelphia. Now it's been found in 40 states. This insanity is spreading, and I need you guys to care about it and fight back today by making a simple decision today that you're not going to do this. Just make a decision to respect yourselves and honor your gifts and talents in life, and make a decision you're never going to put this stuff in your body. Next. Schools are getting Narcan, which is an antidote for the opioids. I think it's good for schools to have this antidote for opioid overdoses because it might help if a student uses drugs at school. But it's not a solution to the problem. Anybody who uses this is already on death's door. I want to convince you guys never to put yourselves in that situation. Next. These young ladies are on spring break. Drinking, being stupid, out looking for a good time, not looking for trouble. They're taking a selfie video. Next. What do we see is going on in that picture? That is a dude in the middle of the day in front of hundreds of people drugging her drink. I don't think his intentions were good. Luckily, nothing happened to that young woman. My 27-year-old daughter, who's now a cop in Idaho, was 22. She came back from Boise State to go to Pacific Beach with some of her girlfriends. They each bought one drink. She was drinking it. Halfway through, she started to feel dizzy. She tells her friends, I'm going to go outside and get some fresh air. Went outside and passed out on the curb in Pacific Beach. Miraculously, somebody good found her passed out, opened her wallet, found her driver's license, drove her home, and dumped her out in the front yard at 3 in the morning. It's a miracle my daughter didn't disappear that night, isn't it? She was not harmed, but she could have been harmed terribly. And what really struck me, because I was wondering, well, where are her friends? There was not one text message, there was not one missed call to her phone from her group of friends saying, Roxy, where are you? They all presumed that she had gone home in an Uber or had gone off with somebody else and was fine. They didn't even try to find her. They're not bad people. They just didn't have a plan to look out for each other. You may think you're safe because you're dudes. You're not. One of my coworkers at DEA, her 20-year-old brother went to a party in Chula Vista, woke up in the morning and had been drugged and raped at a house party. The world is ugly. I can't come in here and share the beautiful part of the world. I come in and share some reality with you. Today, if you're going to party somewhere, you need to be very mindful of where you're going. You need to be thinking about who else is going to be there. You need to think about who you're going with, and you need to have a plan to look out for each other, because we're not going to be there looking out for you. You guys are going to have to look out for each other and for your girlfriends and your brothers and sisters. Next. But as a cop, what can I do? I can take your drugs, take your money, do it over and over again. Have you guys heard about El Chapo Guzman? Yeah. I'm not making this up. My best friend in the DEA is the guy who found him both times. Now, Chapo was very dangerous to catch, and the Mexican Marines actually had to go catch him. But he was impossible to be found. He was a master. But my buddy and a couple other guys in DEA figured out how to find him. And my friend that caught Chapo knows better than anybody else. There's always going to be another one. Now it's Mencho in Mexico, and eventually somebody will kill Mencho or he'll get arrested and it'll be somebody else. As long as Americans want to buy this stuff, there's going to be somebody making it and selling it. That's why that guy that got Chapo, and this sounds like I'm making this up, the guy that got Chapo is actually my biggest supporter in me doing this work right now with you. Because he and I agree, this is the only solution for the future. It may take us 30 or 40 years to change our culture, but we have to start trying now. And if I can't get you guys to start trying now, you are going to be dealing with this problem your entire lives. Next. These are pictures of some of my investigations. Next. Just to show you how creative the drug traffickers are. This woman was getting on a plane in Bolivia for the United States, and we found a kilo of cocaine in her hair. That looks ridiculous. I interviewed that woman. She had made 4 trips successfully before we caught her. Next. I used to see this on the border with Tijuana. The drug traffickers would find a woman, they'd put that on her, fill the belly with drugs, and drive her across the border. Next. There's a lot of violence. Before the drugs show up at your party, there's a lot of violence. Next. There are young children, young people in countries that are so desperate to get here, they will accept this offer. The drug traffickers will go to a young person in Guatemala, Honduras, Bolivia, Colombia, and they'll say, look, do you want to live in the United States or Europe? And these kids go, yes, of course I do. And they'll say, okay, we got a deal for you. We'll give you a plane ticket and a passport and a few $100. All you have to do is swallow some drugs and get on the plane. This guy in Colombia accepted the offer, swallowed those packages of drug, got on the plane, got through security. He thought he was fine. But during the flight, one of those packages of cocaine burst open. He died from a coke overdose on the plane. He didn't suffer. Next. This is the case of mine in Bolivia. 19-year-old kid was coming through security with a ticket for the United States, but he was doubled over. The cops called me over. I was talking to him, and as I was talking to him, he was bending more and more over. I touched his stomach, and it felt like I was hitting a piece of wood. And it turned out the capsules of cocaine that he had swallowed had blocked up inside him. And they don't have ambulance service in Bolivia like we do here, and the only person who had a car was me. So I threw this kid in my DEA car and raced about 15 miles to the airport, praying he wouldn't die in my car, because DEA probably would have fired me. But I got to the hospital and I asked the doctors, here he is, can you rescue him? The doctor said no. They said, who's going to pay him? Who's going to pay us? So I took the $400 that the drug traffickers had given him, and I used that money to pay the doctors to cut him open and pull those packages out. Next. And I sat there and I watched, next, as the doctors pulled out 96 packages of cocaine the size of my thumb. 96 packages of cocaine the size of my thumb that kid swallowed. That's not for human beings. I'm still traumatized from watching. I can still remember that like it's a movie in my head, watching those things just come out of that kid. But most of these young kids don't die. They get here. The drug traffickers meet them at the border, at the airport. They take them to a motel. They sit them on Home Depot buckets until they poop the drugs out. They make them wash it off and repackage it so they can sell it to you guys at the parties. Some of those young people who think they're done, they think they've done what they need to do, they learn another lesson. The drug traffickers go, oh no, you're not done. If you don't sell drugs for us, we're going to kill your family in Guatemala where you came from. Or the young women who do this, who think they've done what they need to do. They're told, oh, no, you're going to prostitute for us, and if you don't, we'll kill your family back wherever you came from. It's a lie. The people here don't have any ability to do that, but those kids don't know that. And they submit themselves to human trafficking here. Another beautiful consequence of Americans not caring about who they hurt with drugs. Next. And we have this problem in San Diego. We have a large population of students who live in TJ who have permission to go to school in San Diego. And they go to school in Imperial Beach or Chula Vista. And the drug cartels take advantage of that. They have other students in those schools working for the drug cartels. So they find students who need money. Dad can't pay the rent, mom's got medical bills. And they say, hey, we'll solve your problem. We'll bring a package to your house tonight, tape it to your body, bring it to school tomorrow, and we'll give you $500 or $1,000. And these young kids go, okay. And these are all pictures of teenagers, next, who were stopped at the border and arrested for carrying these huge quantities of drugs. Next. Next. And I have one story related to this. I was teaching my assembly at Sweetwater High School in Chula Vista several years ago. As the assistant principal was walking me to the gymnasium, he said, Rocky, I've got a problem. And he explained to me that one of his 15-year-old students had agreed to do this. And the night before, the traffickers had dropped off 5 pounds of methamphetamine at her house in TJ. But that morning, she got cold feet. She got nervous. She didn't want to do it. So she came to school without the drugs. Her friend, her classmate, came up to her and said, where's our drugs? And she started crying, and said, oh, no, I can't do it. I don't want to do it anymore. I'll give the drugs back. And he went, okay. He didn't argue. He just said, okay, and walked away. And she thought that she was fine, that she could give the drugs back. But an hour later, she got a text message, and it was a picture of her sister and TJ with a gun to her head. True story. It severely upsets me that our high schools are places where so many young kids are being encouraged to ruin their lives by using drugs, and because of our proximity to the border, many, many young people are being encouraged to go into the drug trafficking business, all to feed our drug habit. Next. Crystal meth. We don't talk about this drug almost at all now, and there's a tidal wave of this stuff coming in from Mexico. I don't know who's using it, but millions of Americans are using this poison. It doesn't look dangerous in those crystals, does it? They don't look dangerous. They look like rock candy or sugar crystals. The person who offers you the drug is always going to tell you, look how pure and safe and clean this is. Sometimes they'll add food coloring and say, oh, this is a special blue meth. This is a special pink meth. But no matter how clean those crystals might look or how many promises you get from the person giving it to you, next, what you can't see are the chemicals they use to make it. And when you use any of these drugs, you're also using some of the residual chemicals they use to make them. And those chemicals damage your bodies as well. Next. These are real meth users. They take the drug to feel strong and powerful. Under the influence, they're higher than, more powerful, more energetic, more sexy than they've ever been in their whole life, they think. But as high as it takes them when they're on it, when it wears off, that's how low it leaves them. And when they're down this low, they're desperate to get more money, to get more of the drug, to try to get back up here. And they go on this cycle of life that goes like this. Next. Everybody in these pictures is somebody's child, somebody's parent, brother or sister. Next. The drug they use to feel strong and powerful, next, does this to them, and they keep using it. Next. These aren't photoshopped. None of these people thought they would be in my presentation, right? None of these people thought they would be in my presentation when they started using. Next. Next. They all thought they could handle it. Next. Next. It says 3.5 years. To me, it looks like that woman aged a hard 35 years in 3.5. I don't know her, but I met many people like her in my career. And I promise you, she saw that. And I promise you, the hundreds of times she said, oh, I got to stop. This is going to kill me. And she meant it. But then her own brain said, no, I don't care who you hurt. Give me my drugs. Next. This is where it's made. These are the laboratories we find in DEA. In the next picture coming up, if you went to a restaurant that had a kitchen this filthy, would you eat food from that restaurant? Of course not. Nobody would. You would leave immediately. You might call the county to turn the place in. There is no quality control. There is no cleanliness. It is not a PhD scientist making the stuff. It's a fool drug dealer mixing chemicals together to sell them to you. The chemicals are toxic and explosive. Next. And when we go clean these places up, we go in spacesuits. The chemicals are so toxic, we try to protect ourselves with special suits and oxygen tanks so we don't breathe in these poisons. Next. This is a real DEA meth lab raid. I'm going to show it anyway, even without the sound. But welcome to my DEA world for a couple minutes, guys. Now we're good. No, you're fine. You're fine. Thanks for your help. That's good. So they're making meth in that house with chemicals like hydrochloric acid. If a human breathes in hydrochloric acid, it ravages your lungs. We go into spacesuits to protect ourselves. What's happening to the baby living in the house? Being poisoned. The baby goes to Child Protective Services, parents go to jail. Was that a nice house in a nice neighborhood? Yes. Do you think they want me coming through the front door like that with my friends? No, they don't. So they move. After they poison that entire house, the carpets, the walls, the ceiling, the furniture, they leave to move somewhere else to poison that new house. Do you think they leave a note, hey, careful, we had a drug lab here? Nope. You move in with your beautiful, healthy family, and you start absorbing all those chemicals. I was at a middle school in El Cajon a couple months ago, and a 12-year-old girl came up crying to hug me and thank me. I said, why are you thanking me? And she goes, I was that baby. She didn't mean she was the baby in the video. What she meant was, at 3 years old, doctors found meth in her system because her parents had exposed her to it, and she was taken from her parents and had to spend 9 years living in the foster care system. As a result of her parents' choices, she lost her childhood because of her parents' choices. And she's grateful that I'm doing these lectures because she does not want anybody else to suffer like she has. Next. I'm almost done. I'm going to finish talking about marijuana and vaping next. Anybody here want to tell me how cool it is for teenagers to do vaping? Good. It's not cool at all, as my friend says. The industry that makes the vapes is lying to you. Even the name vape is a lie. They want you to think it's water vapor. It's anything but. It's propylene glycol, other chemicals. The most important chemical for the companies that make these is the nicotine. Next. When I was your age, we got education in school to teach us not to want cigarettes. We learned what healthy lungs look like and what smoker lungs look like. And after about 40 years of trying to teach teenagers not to want cigarettes, we won that fight. Your generation does not want them. There are exceptions, but your generation does not want cigarettes. You think they're gross and disgusting, which they are. Next. But that created a problem for the tobacco companies. Because the tobacco company's business plan has always been to get you addicted to their products young, so you use them your entire life no matter what happens to you. Next. And since they can't sell you cigarettes, they come up with this. And the Juul company is a liar. The Juul company to this day claims they never made these things to attract them to children. They never made marketing for children. They're liars. And the Juul company is owned by the company that makes Marlboro cigarettes. Next. This is what healthy lungs on the left should look like. Those x-rays on the right are of a guy in San Marcos, California, who filled his lungs with the vaping liquid. His body couldn't absorb it. And he almost drowned. Spent 4 months in the hospital trying to get him out. But I'm not worried about you dying next. I'm not worried about you dying from it. I'm worried about something else. This guy got cancer in his throat from smoking cigarettes. Miraculously, the doctors were able to save his life by cutting out his entire throat. They left a little hole called a stoma so that he could continue to breathe and live. After suffering so much pain and suffering from his smoking, he still smokes. Why? Everybody instantly goes because he's addicted. You all understand how addictive nicotine is. But if you have friends who are vaping, it's the same nicotine. They're going to get at least as addicted as this guy. Next. Nicotine has been used for centuries as an insecticide. Before you could go to the hardware store and buy a can of Raid, people would make their own insecticide out of nicotine. Next. These are some of the commercial poisons you can buy today from nicotine. So next time you see some teenager vaping, acting like they're that cool kid, ask yourself, how cool is it actually to suck on a vaporized insecticide that can get you addicted? Because I don't think it's cool at all. Next. And of course, in California now that it's legalized, very easy for young people to find an adult who will buy them marijuana, either in the plant form or the concentrate or an edible. I meet a lot of teenagers who smoke weed, and they give me different reasons for why they do it. It's my opinion that the vast majority of teenagers who smoke weed today are doing it to get stoned and stupid like my friends did. But I always get but it's medicine, Rocky. And I agree. Yes, it is medicine, guys. One of my sisters died from cancer. Another sister's fighting cancer. Both of my sisters discovered that using the cannabis products helped them with their cancer symptoms. I think that's a miracle and wonderful, that anybody who's sick can benefit from it. If you are a teenager with a medical diagnosis and a recommendation for marijuana from your doctor, I will accept that it's medicine for you. Everybody else, you're just using it as an excuse to get stoned, convincing yourself you're not harming yourself. Next. And the marijuana is very different today. Next. The marijuana that my friends offered me was 4% THC. The marijuana Bob Marley smoked back in the day was 4% THC. THC is the drug in the marijuana plant that gets you high. But the people making this stuff and selling it want more profit, so they've created a hybrid plant. And in California, the new marijuana plant produces 25 to 30% THC. It's nothing like that natural plant that you're being told it is. Someone smoking a joint today is smoking something as powerful as 5 or 6 joints were when I was a kid, and nobody chain smoked weed like that. But teenagers are telling us they don't even like smoking the joints. Next. They prefer using the concentrates. And this stuff has those cool names of bubble hash and butter, and they make it look so interesting. But this stuff has a potency of 80 to 90% THC. Medical doctors in the United States cannot research the effects on human beings of more than 10% THC. And we have potentially millions of teenagers at least occasionally using the stuff that's 80 to 90% THC. Next. Why would they make the gummies look like this? Who are they trying to sell these to? They could make these things look like anything, and they make them look like that to market them to young people. Next. It's an addictive drug. You guys are being told it's this natural thing, it's an herbal supplement. I go to some high schools and the students ask me why I'm talking about marijuana. They say it's not even a drug. We've washed their brains. It's crazy. American doctors say it's an addictive drug. Next. In the New York Times, they're not a big fan of the DEA. In their article about teenagers using marijuana, psychosis, addiction, and chronic vomiting as some of the consequences from teenagers using marijuana. Next. The studies have been showing for years the damage that's happening to teenagers. We're not seeing that same damage in adults who use it. I'm not up here declaring that marijuana is the devil weed. I'm saying it's a drug that has different impacts on teenagers than it has on adults. And I think that's because the adult brain is done growing. But over and over, science is proving that young people who use it are changing how their brains grow. Next. 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 Skip over this. There's no sound. Our drug treatment centers are full of young people who can't quit smoking weed. Families are paying huge money to put their kids in drug treatment centers to get them off weed. Next. New studies. Cannabis use in pregnancy may lead to more aggressive child. Cannabis use in pregnancy, more autistic children. Cannabis use in pregnancy, more premature birth. These are all things we try to avoid in our babies. The first thing I thought of when I saw all these articles was, how many babies are being damaged by marijuana in our country that we can do so many scientific studies? Next. But this is what I get. And I'm sure some of you are thinking the same thing. You've tuned me out. You have tuned me out when it comes to weed because you've been told 10,000 times it's this herbal supplement. You use it and like it. Everybody in your world uses it and likes it. So you're not interested in hearing the truth about it. Next. And I'm okay with that. I don't expect to change your minds in the short time I'm with you. But if you think I'm lying, if you think I'm making up all this garbage about it hurting teenagers, I have a simple challenge for you. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Do the research yourself. Show me the scientific studies telling me I'm wrong. Google teen brain damage marijuana. And if you read some of those scientific studies backing up everything I'm saying and you want to keep using it, that's on you. That's your choice. But at least you'll be informed. Next. Ecstasy, next. Always been made in these pretty colorful pills to market it to you. But anybody can buy a pill press off of eBay, make a pill out of anything they want, and sell it to you and claim it's pure and safe and good. Next. If I did not talk about some drug that you're interested in today, it's not because it's not dangerous too. I can only talk about so many drugs in my assemblies. It's all garbage. It's all going to damage you, and it's going to change your futures. Next. In a park in Connecticut, a stranger walked in the park handing out hand-rolled cigarettes. He told the people in the park, these are spice cigarettes. Spice is a synthetic drug that gets you high like weed, not natural at all. And 110 people smoked those things and overdosed and ended up in the hospital. I don't think if a stranger walked in that park with a bag of food that 110 people would have accepted food from him, right? Because we all figured out you don't take food from strangers. But in our culture, 100 people, more than 100 people took a drug that potentially killed themselves by accepting it. Next. If the school gave you burritos for lunch today that looked like that, would you eat them? It's a stupid question, right? I went to a 4-day survival school with the Army in Panama, and I had no food for 4 days. I might have eaten that after 4 days of no food. But most of us are going to look at that thing and be so grossed out we would gag if we tried to eat it. Because we all learned by 2 years old, as part of the natural human development, you don't eat food that can hurt you. We could offer that burrito to a hungry 2-year-old little girl, and she's going to look at us and go, ooh, icky, and not eat it. How could it be that everybody sitting here today learned at 2, you don't put harmful things in your body, but at this age, you might be willing this weekend or a year or 5 years from now, some party, some fool walks up with a pill or a powder or a crystal that you now know could kill you or the friend next to you, and instead of going, oh man, get away from me, some of you might be going, cool, right on, my turn. Because that's how it happens. And if you do that, it's because you completely turned off your brain to the consequences, and you now know the consequences. Next. I'm here because I believe in your potential. I've done 800 of these assemblies. I did 5 yesterday. I'm tired. I could show up at a school and put in a DVD and sit in the back of the room and claim I'm educating you. I bring myself every time, hoping one of you is listening. The school believes in your potential. I believe in your potential. Doesn't matter what we believe. Do you believe in your potential? I wish I could ask you individually, each of you that. Do you believe in your potential in life enough to make the obvious choice to go, no thank you, when people offer you this stuff? Do you believe in your friend's potential enough to tell your friend, hey dude, don't do that. I'm not going to let you do that. When a teenager dies at a party, it's not a small thing. Somebody sees the kid's not moving, calls 911, the paramedics show up. If there's a chance to rescue the child, they take him to the hospital. If not, the body stays there. Then law enforcement gets called. Then the medical examiner gets called. Then the DEA gets called. That takes time. Inevitably, during that time, somebody lets the family of the victim know there's a problem. They text the brother or sister, or somebody calls the parents and say, hey, your son or daughter's had a problem at this address, come help. The parents rush over thinking their child's maybe passed out from being drunk or had some kind of an accident, and they show up and discover their precious child's dead. Twice in my life, I had to see conversations that are burned in my memory where a teenager had to explain to their best friend's mom why they let their son or daughter use the drug that killed them at the party. And the trauma and the anguish in that friend's eyes is something that person will be scarred with forever. So I'm here for you, but I'm going to beg you guys to be strong for your friends so you don't get to experience what that means. Next. And this is my last slide. I've made a lot of mistakes raising my daughters, man. I have a lot of regrets right now. We get along, we're good. Now that I'm semi-retired, I'm trying to rebuild some relationship with them. But when my youngest daughter was 8, I got invited to her elementary school to talk about my job. And I went in, I did a good job, all the kids loved me. When I came home that night, my daughter drew that picture of me and gave it to me. You guys will not understand this until you're parents yourselves. When your child does something to tell you that you're their hero, that is a treasure. It's a treasure then and always will be in my life. All the things I screwed up, I did not screw that up. The note is from a man I arrested here in San Diego. He was a heavy, heavy drug dealer. When I arrested him, I discovered he was also a heavy drug user. In fact, he was dealing drugs just to be able to buy his own drugs. He's in my office in handcuffs. I search him completely. I find this note in his wallet. The note says, "Dear Dad, drugs are for babies." And I'm asking the guy, what is this? And he goes, "It's a note from my son." I said, "How old's your son?" He goes, 6. And I lost it. I started yelling at that guy. Other DEA agents came running to figure out why I was yelling. Because when I read that note from a 6-year-old, what I read is, "Dear Dad, stop ruining my life. Dear Dad, stop hurting me." How much pain does a 6-year-old child have to be in, gentlemen, to write that note to his own father? Too much? Can we agree on that one? Too much? So I started yelling at the guy. He's crying. He's trying to defend himself. And he tells me, Rocky, I know I'm harming my son, but I'm trying to stop. I'm going to stop. And he said he carried the note with him to help him motivate to stop. But then he said that every time he tried to stop, his own brain said no. His own brain said, I don't care who you hurt, give me my drugs. What kind of a life is that? Living every day knowing you're harming your most precious child, unable to stop. So as I finish today, guys, I appreciate you for being an excellent audience, and I leave you with a question that only you can answer. What future do you choose? What future do you choose today, tomorrow, and every day? Are you going to make the obviously good choices that build you a life where you bring pride and love and joy to your families and loved ones? Or are you willing to make the obviously bad choices and run with fools on a path that very likely takes you to a place where you're giving pain and sadness to your own homes and families? That choice is always going to be yours, and we hope you make the right one. Thank you. Thank you. Before I go, and I truly appreciate you for having me here. I appreciate the school. I appreciate you guys. I do this a lot. And I can tell I got a lot of respect from you guys, and I'm very grateful for that. It's hard without the sound, and we had a few glitches. But I'm really happy with the reception you guys gave me. Would you mind letting me take a picture of you? Can I take a selfie with you guys doing the hand sign? Now, very careful. It's this finger, not this one, okay? Just make sure you use the first finger. All right. Sure. We good? All right. Thanks, guys.